So the Project Magnum trailer dropped a long time ago. But when I saw it, I was like, ooh, yo, it's looking kind of clean though. Like the trailer was nice.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Currently supposed to be a third-person looter shooter, and looter shooters, especially the more recent ones, not looking too good, let's be honest. So the actual quality of the game is all going to depend on the actual execution. Today we're going to go over a few of the do's and don'ts of Project Magnum. Make sure to watch to the end of the video, even if you have to speed it up. All right, look, I know I talk slow sometimes, but there's very important information near the end of the video that most people probably aren't going to talk about. First, we're gonna start with the ideal base game. Most looter shooters release terribly. But one of the best ways to draw attention and praise at the beginning of the game is to launch correctly. Just launching in a finished state, I know it sounds like common sense and like the bare minimum, but unfortunately most looter shooters do not launch in a good state. So doing the bare minimum in this case is actually exceptional. Imagine that, bro. It's like being a kid and you brought nothing but F's home, so when you finally get like a D or a C minus, like everybody in the house hype, like, hey yo, this man just won the Olympics or something. And then if you get A's all day, you come home, you get a B plus and you be getting the brakes beat off of you because your expectations are too high, bro. But luckily for Project Magnum, its expectations are below the floor, like basement level expectations. The bare minimum is all that it needs. But I'm not just gonna ask for the bare minimum. I want actually exceptional. So another thing that I think Project Magnum needs to do is just to learn from other looter shooters' mistakes. For some strange reason, they have the inability to look at other looter shooters and learn from their mistakes. Avengers, for example. We have had multiple looter shooters up until Avengers came out, and we pretty much unanimously understand that bad loot, trash drop rates, loot that doesn't usually change the way your character looks, and just uninteresting loot as a whole does not go well within the looter shooter community. So what did Avengers do? It did literally everything I just said. It had the most boring loot. It didn't affect your cosmetics or your appearance in any way. Most of the actual effects weren't even visible, and if they were, it was like, it was just a mess, man. So when it comes to things like loot, you want to make it interesting. You do not want trash tier loot. You don't want basic stat changes. Of course, that's important in a looter shooter, but there are other things that make loot interesting, like secondary effect, conditional effects that you could add to the gear or that it came with. That way it just made it a lot more interesting than just doing more damage or giving you more health. I honestly think that Outriders did loot extremely well. Now, of course, it's not perfect. Outriders has its issues when it comes to how much of it's viable and stuff like that, but when it comes to the basic design of loot, how interesting it is, the effects that come with it, I think Outriders is one of the best looter shooters in that specific category. Another pretty important thing, I think, is we need to have a basic story. It doesn't need to be the best story in history. It doesn't need to be like the Final Fantasy of looter shooters. That would be kind of dope, I'm not gonna lie, but as long as it's engaging, I think it should be fine. Look at Outriders. The story wasn't amazing, it wasn't groundbreaking, but it was interesting enough. They had like little side notes you could look into, collectibles, stuff like that to gain extra lore on the game. It just made the game more interesting, especially if you're a story kind of guy or whatever. Look at OG Destiny, vanilla Destiny, bro. Hot trash. To this day, bro. To this day. It still gets clowned. Because it didn't have a story. It was non-existent. All the story was like, I think it was on like their actual Destiny website, which nobody went to except for a bunch of reviewers, because who has time for that? Like, no, put the story in the game, bro. It doesn't take a astrophysicist. I don't even know if that's a real thing. It doesn't take PhD levels of intelligence to understand that having a story in your game is probably a good idea. And then one of the most important parts of having a good looter shooter is just the basic gameplay. It needs to be top notch. From the trailer, it looked decent. It looked pretty good in my opinion when it comes to concept. It wasn't really a gameplay trailer, it was more a cinematic trailer. So unless that stuff carries over into actual gameplay, then it doesn't really mean much. At the end of the day, we've seen a ton of amazing trailers, Anthem, No Man's Sky, and then you get the actual game and it's hot garbage. Like, nah, bro. Your cinematics mean nothing. This is not a movie, all right? We want good gameplay. Some of the important parts of good gameplay is a good level of balance. There needs to be engagement, interactivity.
What?
Is that a word? You know what? Who cares? We're gonna go with it. Interactivity. What do I mean by that? Well, there are certain games like Warframe where for the most part, you just kind of shoot at stuff and it instantly evaporates. Now there's a lot of people who enjoy that, but one, Warframe already kind of fills that void for a lot of people. It's the brain dead looter shooter. And two, the majority of people don't usually want to just evaporate things mindlessly.
You stupid.
Which is why Destiny, or at least one of the reasons why Destiny, even though I would argue in a lot of ways is a lot worse than Warframe, but when it comes to core gameplay, it's a lot more interactive, it's a lot more engaging, and it's a lot more difficult. And that's why time after time, Destiny is above Warframe. You gotta hold the L, take the good with the bad. Project Magnum, you do not want to be a brain dead video game. I promise you, if it is, I will fold this game, bro. I will be so pissed if we get Warframe 2.0 with Project Magnum.
Look here! Look, listen!
Alright, so if you're still watching to this point in the video, I'm gonna need you to stop everything you're doing. I need you to like the video, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell, all that nonsense, you know? Help me get some clout when it comes to the YouTube algorithm, okay? I need the clout, bro. Especially comment, bro. Nobody comments on my videos. I want to hear what y'all have to say, even if y'all talking trash about the video. Anyway, on to the video. Another extremely important part of the core gameplay is the movement. I hate games with bad movement mechanics. It's just disappointing. You do movement in a game more than you do literally anything else. So if the movement isn't fun, the core gameplay as a whole won't be fun, or at least it won't be as fun as it could have been if you had good movement. So luckily, there are grappling hooks in the trailer. So if they actually make that a gameplay mechanic, they could steal like the grappling mechanics from something like a really old game like, what was it, Lost Planet 2? Although it was a bit clunky in that game, but it's an old game, so if they modernize the game, it could be a lot more fluid. And probably the easiest one I think to use, Monster Hunter Rise. It doesn't necessarily need anything to grapple on, which would make designing it a lot easier. And it looked kind of fun to use, like it looked fun to just fly around with the grappling hook. But you have to keep in mind, when you have movement mechanics like that, for example, Spider-Man or even Anthem with the flight mechanics, you have to design levels and enemies around those mechanics. So once you're flying through the air at Mach 9 at breakneck speeds like you're freaking Kizaru from One Piece or some nonsense, depending on how complex or fast or unique your movement mechanics are, you're gonna have to design the enemies around that. Now, if done right, it could be an extremely unique and interesting game to play. If done wrong, it could be Warframe. So another L for Warframe, it is what it is.
That's true. That's true. That's pretty true.
Luckily, when it comes to core actual gameplay, like the shooter mechanics or just combat as a whole, apparently this game is being done by Nexon. And Nexon created Vindictus, and Vindictus slaps when it comes to basic gameplay. Has a billion issues, but I would still argue that when it comes to core gameplay, like it's probably top 5 MMOs period, and that game's old as dirt, old as hell. So if they modernize that, and if they could translate that into a shooter, then everything should be fine. I'm not too worried about it when it comes to actual combat. Which brings me to the next point, loot. probably one of the most important points of a looter shooter, obviously, and a place where many others have failed and died due to making the same simple mistake. 1. Variety. Loot variety is extremely important. You gotta have a lot of items for the player to chase after. You have a million guns in a game, but if they're more or less pretty much exactly the same, then it's not interesting. Anthem made this mistake. Almost all the guns looked exactly the same. They just were different colors and had different stats, and most of the stats were very small. It didn't really feel like you were improving much. You don't want all your loot to basically feel the same. It's not just about the look, it's how they actually function in the game. Next, you have amount and rarity. Amount of loot in general is pretty important. Ideally, you want to give the players a ton of loot to shuffle through. Heaps of crap, like Borderlands. Borderlands throws so much crap at you. You're constantly shuffling through loot and trying to find the item that you like the most to fit your playstyle. But you also have to have a level of rarity to where you don't just instantly unlock all the good stuff at the beginning of the game. If you do that, then there's no point in playing the looter shooter. If you get all the loot immediately, it's kind of pointless. But you don't want to be so annoyingly RNG like BDO's enhancement mechanics that you just want to kill yourself because you don't have $9,000 to be able to compete in the end game. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know you should be reasonable. Another extremely important part of loot in general is customization. Nobody wants ugly, trash tier, boring loot. There should be transmog in the game, obviously. And don't make us freaking fight to unlock it like Destiny 2, because that was a terrible mechanic and is still stupid to this day. But nobody wants to have a boring character. One of the coolest parts about MMOs or multiplayer games in general is flexing how cool you look. Easily allow us to customize our character through the loot. This way you can combine both the stats and rarity of gear with the customization and look of gear, so that players not only have to tailor it to their playstyle, but they could also tailor it to the way they want to look. Look at PSO2, the game's dead. There's like nothing to do, and people still play it and take screenshots. There are people who play that game purely because of the cosmetics. Same thing with Warframe, bro. One of the most brain dead games on the market. Minecraft has more difficulty and engagement than Warframe, and people still play that game just to take screenshots. There's literally a whole mode in Warframe just to take screenshots. Come on now, this is a no-brainer. And then of course, sustainability. The game needs to have long-term content and long-term goals. Anthem's core gameplay, I would argue, is one of the best. The movement, the flight, I think all those are pretty good. The issue with Anthem was literally everything else. One of the worst issues with Anthem was the fact that there was nothing to do. It took them like 19 years to add in the so-called endgame, and that came in 1, super late, and then 2, it wasn't that interesting, and it was the same stuff recycled a million times. If you do not have a decent roadmap and can stick to that roadmap for the most part, or at least drop consistent and interesting content for the players, then your looter shooter is gonna die. Live service dies if your live service sucks. Look at Destiny, bro. You have a guaranteed new DLC, a huge content update every year. Guaranteed, at least once a year. And then between those updates you have the seasons, so you always have something to do. If you don't want to play the game, you can avoid it, but if you want to keep playing Destiny, they give you enough to have something to do. Plus they have PvP, which is a good distraction, so having a good amount of sustainability in the game is pretty important. If you can't do PvP, then you need to be able to churn out enough content so that the players are satisfied with the money they put into the game, or just the time they put into the game even. And then finally, probably the most important part of this whole thing is monetization.
Oh shit, here we go again.
I don't know everything about the companies that are working on this game, but I do know that Nexon is somehow involved, and that's a red flag. Because Nexon is not exactly known for being the most, how do you say, fair, community-friendly company when it comes to monetization.
Got him!
These people will nickel and dime you every chance they get. Vindictus for the longest time, I heard it change, but for the longest time was super unfair. It's probably worse than BDO when it comes to enhancement mechanic. But even worse, you actually needed to have those enhancements to play the game after a certain point. So yeah, you don't want to do that. Just make a decent business model that's fair. Destiny 2, I would argue, is still kind of pay to win. They screw their players over every, year or so by deleting content that they paid for, but they drop content regularly and it's really fun. So if you could at least somewhat respect the player and the community and their investment in your game, then you'll probably be fine. I would look at Warframe. Warframe has one of the best monetization schemes I've ever seen in a game. I'd probably do a hybrid between Warframe and Destiny.
Yeah, boy.
Why? Because DLC updates just tend to be better if you have to pay for them. Not only that, but you can support the company every year or so, or however often they drop content updates. And when you pay for things, usually there's a lot less scummy stuff going on with other mechanics like microtransactions because they're getting their money in other ways. But this is Nexon, and I mean, Destiny 2 exists. No matter how much you love the game, you have to admit they've done a lot of scummy stuff. Even the freaking YouTubers like MTashed, I think, that other white guy who does videos, I'll probably throw an image up or something. They've been called out by their most loyal players about how they've done scummy stuff like selling transmog. Like, come on now, Destiny, out of pocket. Nexon, don't do that. And finally, one of the most important parts of any co-op game or any multiplayer game is crossplay. I know it's kind of difficult to actually implement in game. There's a lot of crap that I don't understand that can complicate the process, but at the end of the day, people love playing with their friends. And if you have crossplay, people can play with their friends more frequently because they don't have to worry about, oh, my friend plays Xbox and I play on PS5, or I play PC. I hate having to play only Fortnite because all my friends play on consoles and I have a PC. It's irritating. So add crossplay. Simple solution. Not only that, but a lot of these looter shooters don't have crossplay. Some of them are working on it, like Warframe, but a lot of them don't have it. So having crossplay is gonna put you a step above all the other looter shooters. Easy dub, bro. It's a layup. And hopefully it'll drop in a really well state. It'll be the best looter shooter, and I won't have to touch Destiny or Warframe ever again. We'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic. That's probably the best way to put it. But I want to leave this on a high note. That being, what I saw from the trailer, although limited, was pretty interesting, and the gameplay looked genuinely fun to play. This game has unlimited potential right now, so please, Nexon, do the game justice. Don't mess it up like y'all always do, bro. Please, Nexon, please. It's okay. Anyway, let me know what you think. Game my video in the comments, or let me know what you think of Project Magnum in the comments down below. End the video. You know, tell me what you did or didn't like. Tell me how much you love Destiny, and this isn't gonna kill or hurt the Destiny community in any way because you're a Destiny fanboy. I don't care. Or how Warframe's the greatest looter shooter on the planet, bro. Like, I know inevitably if anybody sees this, there's gonna be those people in the comment. But hopefully I've managed to brighten up your day and inform you or give you ideas or hope for Project Magnum. Thanks for watching. God bless. And lights out.